Hello and welcome to Deep Thought, Shallow Plots. My name's Erika, and I like to watch horror movies.
My name's Katy, and I like to overanalyze things.
So, Katy, what are we going to overanalyze today?
Today, we are beginning our grindhouse double feature with Planet Terror.
2007, directed by Robert Rodriguez.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. This is meant to be a double feature episode. We're going to talk about Planet Terror first because in the original release of the double feature, it was shown first.
Mm-hmm.
But next time we'll talk about Death Proof.
Yes.
And so obviously we'll talk about Death Proof next time. So like we don't need to do it so much right now. But I'm very excited.
Yes.
I love Death Proof. Probably one of my
Yeah.
one of my favorite movies.
On record now saying that we like Death Proof more than Planet Terror.
And Planet
And
Terror.
we will fight about it.
Yeah, we'll fight anybody who wants to fight us on that.
Yeah.
Planet Terror is a ton of fun.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's gross. It's gory. It's a little campy.
I would say it sets out to do what it wants to do, which is be a grindhouse.
It executes its vision. And I like Death Proof more.
But it doesn't matter because we're going to talk about Planet Terror.
We're going to talk about Planet Terror.
Which we like, and which stars our girl.
Oh, yeah, friend of the pod.
Yeah.
Rose McGowan in her second appearance.
Yes.
Soon to be third.
Soon to be third. Keep it coming, Rose.
Because she's also in Death Proof. What other Rose McGowan movies could we watch? Like, we could spin Jawbreaker as a horror movie.
Jawbreaker.
What else? It's so hard because we'll talk about, like, she really did get blacklisted.
For a while, yeah.
And her career really was kind of at a dead end.
Mm-hmm.
So should we talk about, like, for the uninitiated, what Planet Terror is even about?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah?
Just to give a quick little scoodle-a-doo about it.
Okay.
A scoodle-a-doo. A synopsis.
Is that... Okay, yeah.
It's, small, Texas border town.
Yeah.
The military done fucks up, or do they? Or do they do it on purpose? Releases some sort of chemical weapon that starts turning people into zombies. And c'est la vie, man.
You know how it goes.
You know how it goes.
There's a biochemical weapon outbreak, basically, that's turning people into zombies. But not everyone. There are some survivors.
Yes,
right?
some people are immune.
So I've been thinking about how do I understand this film as a text?
Mm-hmm.
Just my own self watching this movie.
Yeah.
And what do I need to understand it more deeply?
Yeah.
So I feel like I was coming to this movie because I'd already seen it before. You hadn't.
Nope.
Never seen it before. So I'd already seen it before. I was familiar, with Grindhouse. I have a passing familiarity with Robert Rodriguez. Obviously, I'm much more familiar with Quentin Tarantino as a director and, filmmaker. And then watching it and kind of being like, there's obviously, like, this movie is full of references, right? And so, like, what are these references? Maybe understanding that better will help me understand this film as a text better.
Right, because the whole conceit of their double feature that they got together to make, this is Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez, was that they wanted to sort of bring back the idea of double feature grindhouse thing.
Yeah, and like a time gone by experience of like a movie theater going experience.
Yeah. And you can see that specifically in how it all looks kind of like, what's the word for when the film is all kind of dirty?
Like
grainy. Yeah, it all looks kind of grainy, and they're like missing reel jokes, and they made a bunch of fake trailers at the beginning.
And a couple of which have actually been made into feature-length films.
Yeah, like
Machete and Machete Kills. It's got two films. And then I think they also...
Was it Hobo with a Gun?
Hobo with a Shotgun. Yeah,
Shotgun.
I think, which was, a Canadian production, but...
Yeah.
So do we just want to talk about, like, our initial kind of impressions and of the characters and the plot and the fun zombie destroying romp that is this film?
Yeah.
So we already talked about Rose McGowan.
Yeah.
Who else is in this cast? We've got a lovely cameo by Bruce Willis. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We've got Freddie Rodriguez. We've got Marley Shelton, who plays Dr. Dakota Block, who I know we probably both have some feelings about.
Yeah. We've got two actors who were on Lost.
We do. We have Naveen Andrews.
Yeah.
Who plays Abby in this.
My mother's number one crush, Naveen Andrews.
I mean, yeah. He cute. Who else is in Lost?
JT's actor.
Oh, Jeff Fahey?
Yeah.
Who
yeah,
is
he's
he in Lost?
some guy.
Okay. We've got Fergie.
Fergie.
Fergie
How
gets
did
a
we not start
cameo
with
in this
Fergie? And
Uh,
she does, I would say, a great job.
she does a pretty good job.
She
yeah.
does great.
Oh,
her little line about how she's gonna save some lives. I'm like, you are gonna save lives, Fergie. Then she doesn't.
But
But
she
I
doesn't.
believed her.
Oh, that she was going to save the lives of Marley and Tony.
Yeah.
Or sorry,
Dakota.
And Tony.
Yeah.
Oh, and of course, Josh Brolin,
Oh yeah.
who I'm a fan of. I think he's a pretty good actor. I really enjoyed him in No Country for Old Men, which
Yeah.
would have come out like literally just right after this, if not
He
before.
apparently got some help to do his audition tape from like the crew on this movie because he was
Oh, for No
auditioning
Country for
for
Old
it.
Men.
Yeah,
Oh,
because he
wow.
was auditioning for it while they were doing this movie.
That's awesome.
I guess they didn't want to give him an audition for No Country for Old Men. They were like, nah, he wouldn't be right for it. They're like,
Whoa.
we're going to give an audition. So he was
Oh.
like, you need to make me a really good audition tape.
Well, they were wrong because he
'Cause he
did
was
amazing.
great, yeah.
he was great.
yeah, so
And
we have this movie to thank for that.
yeah, and he's a very different character in this film and like really good at being like a complete dick.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
he's a good villain.
Yeah, he's a good villain. Yeah. So I mean, first of all, I was just like absolutely blown away, and I know it's a movie, but I was just totally blown away by the fact that Rose McGowan's hair and makeup stays absolutely immaculate through a car crash,
Yeah.
her losing a leg,
Yeah.
even before that being run off the side of the road by
Into like a trash can.
and getting like a big like 3-inch piece of glass stuck in her
Yeah.
leg, right? Losing her leg, all of that stuff.
yeah.
Hair and makeup, absolutely immaculate.
Though noticeably, Dakota, our doctor,
Uh-huh.
they like make it a point that her makeup is all runny and smeary.
Oh, yes.
And she looks all like she's been crying a bunch. And
That's
like,
true.
They
yeah,
smear her up.
they do. But then and then over the course of the film, they like fix it again. Yeah. Like
And it's like a very artful messing up the
Yeah,
makeup.
yeah,
It's like how when people get scars that are like right on their cheekbones, it's like, oh, you're disheveled, but in a sexy way.
So like of the characters in this film, who would you say is your favorite?
Oh, yeah, no, it's got to be the iconic Cherry.
Yeah,
Cherry Darling.
Yeah, and it's funny because when she meets back up with Ray
Mm-hmm.
at the Bone Shack,
Yes.
the barbecue place, he does mention like, what name are you going by now,
Mhm.
right? And she says Cherry Darling, and he says like, that's a stripper name, and she's like, it's a go-go dancer's name. There's a difference.
Yes.
But honestly, Cherry Darling to me, that's a drag queen name.
Well, it's a thin line.
Of course, yes, and
Because it's all performances of femininity.
Yeah,
and, like,
yeah.
It's all like exaggerating femininity.
Right, yeah.
With these sort of names that drag queens use and that go-go dancers and strippers use.
right.
Yeah.
So we kind of have, I feel like in this film, we see two parallel relationships, right? We see Cherry and Ray, and we have the doctor's block.
Yes, the doctor's block.
Dakota and
Bill.
Bill.
Yep.
Yeah.
Dr. Bill Block.
And, I think their relationships are similar in some way, but
Yeah.
not in
'Cause,
other
yeah.
ways.
Abuse is such an important thing in this movie because it's like, this is like a zombie movie.
Yes,
Like
it
that
is.
is what it is. It's
Yeah.
a zombie movie. That's what they set out to do. But I just feel like the real threat comes from abusive men.
Who's the real monster here?
Right? Yeah. All of the real threats are
That
like,
makes me think of, have you seen any of the Cloverfield movies?
no, I have not.
They're good.
We'll add them to the list.
Yeah, add them to the list. And the sequel, 10 Cloverfield Lane, it's just like such a fantastic film that totally plays on the like, what's the real danger? Who's the real monster here? Spoiler alert, it's human beings.
Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah.
feel like that's out of play here because it's like, despite, like, yes, all the women in this film are threatened by these zombies
Yeah.
on and off. Like, the scariest scenes for them are, like, Dakota getting threatened by her husband, by her abusive husband in
Right.
the hospital. And
being
it's like,
stabbed with her own needles
yeah.
several times.
yeah, and getting threatened. Yeah.
And then becoming incapacitated.
Yeah.
Well, she figures out a way, but like she's at a severe disadvantage.
yeah, because she can't use her hands.
because her hands are offline for,
Yeah.
I'm sure it's meant to be several hours.
Right, yeah. So we have that. And then, like, the scariest scene for Cherry is when she almost gets raped.
Oh yeah, by Quentin Tarantino, whose credited name in this film is Rapist #1.
Yeah.
Which, honestly, I appreciate that.
That they
Instead
didn't
of-
bother giving him a
Don't
name.
give him a name.
Yeah.
I don't care what his rank is because he's
Yeah.
supposed to be
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a, could they call him like sergeant rapist or
Yeah.
something? I don't know ranks. I don't know
know.
where sergeant is. I don't know.
either, but
Anyway.
but it doesn't matter.
It doesn't
Fuck
matter.
him.
Yeah, rapist number 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, love that for them.
Yeah, so we have all these zombies, but like all these men who are like actually the monster.
Right.
So we have the very clearly abusive relationship between the doctors,
Yes.
where Dr. Bill
Yeah.
is being abusive to his wife. And then we have Cherry and El Rey.
El Rey. Yeah, so can I just super quick because I'm just do you have any insight as to why Ray is spelt the way it's spelt in this film? W-R-A-Y.
I think they were trying to be a little tongue-in-cheek with it because it is, what is it? A homophone.
Homophone?
Yeah, homophone.
For El Rey,
R-E-Y.
R-E-Y, which means king
Yeah,
in
a
Spanish.
king.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And then I was like, oh, but it's spelt strangely. And
Yeah.
honestly, what it evokes to me is like a ray of sunshine,
Yeah, not a stingray.
not a stingray. But hold on, a ray of sunshine, isn't that just R-A-Y?
Yeah.
Gosh darn it. Okay. Yeah, maybe it's just like a little
I think it's supposed to be
play,
kind
yeah.
of, a little play, tongue-in-cheek thing. I think also Robert Rodriguez, he has
Also,
like some sort
Ray-
of company that's like El Rey or something.
Oh, okay. Also, Ray with the W-R-A-Y. I mean, that's a last name people have. Like maybe
Yeah.
it's his last name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't really know. I mean, that's the other thing is that we don't really know a lot about El Rey because his entire backstory is part of a missing reel
Yes.
sort of joke where like we come back from a missing reel with the sheriff being like, "Thanks for telling me all that, El Rey.
Yeah, yeah,
If I'd
yeah.
known that you were that El Rey."
El Rey.
And then we just have to be like, "Oh."
And they
it's
spend
Steve."
the first half of the movie talking about how Ray shouldn't have guns.
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't have guns. You're not allowed to have them with your history. What's that history? We don't ever get to find
No,
out,
no.
right? Which is, kind of nice when I actually kind of like it when, a film really intentionally says, like, we're not going to tell you this.
Mm-hmm.
Fill it in yourself, right? Instead of leaving it, like, vague and allowing for, like, people to kind of fight about what it means. It's just like it's not in there intentionally. Just
Yep. It's a missing reel. Move
you
on.
have fun with your imagination, you know.
But yeah, El Rey, he's an interesting character and his relationship with a lot of people, but Cherry specifically right here.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be our like main romantic relationship in this film.
Yeah.
But I think we both got
It's like the one sex scene we get.
yeah,
Yeah.
which is also a missing reel. Well, it's
Yeah.
part of the same missing reel.
It's all part of the same joke. Yeah.
yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when you and I were watching it together because it takes place at the Bone Shack, right? And Cherry's already there, and El Rey shows up, and I remember you said, like, does it look like she wants to talk right now?
Yeah.
But
I mean, then it turned out that they already knew
they
each
knew
other.
each other, right? Yeah,
And I was still like, does it look like she wants to get to know you again?
yeah, like she wants to know what you're up to right now. Yeah.
No, and then we find out that she was the one who left him,
Yes.
but then he has to give her a lot of crap about it because she took his jacket with him.
Right.
But then it turns out it's because he had an engagement ring in that jacket for her because it was going to be 2 against the world, baby.
Right, yeah. And it's interesting because, like, El Rey says several times, like, I looked for it for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right? But we don't know how long Sherry has had the jacket.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's like, how long have you had that jacket, girl? Because, like, you haven't gone through the pockets? Like, you haven't found it yet?
Yeah, I know,
Like,
right? I wondered that too.
Okay.
Because it seems
happens.
like it's kind of been a while since they last saw each other.
It does. Yeah. It's like, she's got a new name.
Yeah.
Like, he asked her if she ever became a doctor.
Right.
But it's just so funny because the ring is also just like kind of underwhelming. The box is a little beat up. The ring is, it's fine.
It seemed fitting for like the means of these people.
Probably.
Like he has his little Ray's wrecker
Yeah,
truck.
yeah.
That's like
His
a
killdozer
yeah,
truck, whatever.
That is just like a fucking. Is it like
It's
a tow truck?
It's a
Is
tow
it just
truck.
a tow truck?
Yeah, it's a
Okay,
tow
I wasn't sure because it was the wrecker. So I was like, is he actually wrecking things with it, or is he getting things that are wrecked?
Yeah.
This is confusing, El Rey. I get you're doing the WR thing, but like,
Right. And it's interesting because like that's actually a really interesting scene where where he's just like check the engraving and it's like 2 against the world, and then like several moments later, not very long after that, he like asks Cherry like, why did you leave? And she says, you didn't believe in us.
yeah,
And I was like, okay, so then how are you 2 against the world, El Rey?
right.
No,
No, and then the other red flag that comes earlier in that scene from
Yeah.
what they talk about is when he's talking about the jacket. She's like, well, are you going to go on another one of your like psycho obsessive controlling rants about it?
Yeah.
And I'm like, his
more.
his psycho obsessive controlling rants, you
rants?
say?
Yeah.
That sounds I have questions.
Right. And
So yeah, this is somebody who she felt like didn't believe in her.
Yeah.
Seems to kind of belittle all of her goals. Even in the current day, when they meet again, she's like, I'm going to be a comedian.
Yeah.
I've got stand-up gigs lined up.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, but you're not funny.
And
He like says multiple times, you're not funny. Even and then she's like, you're a dick.
And then she goes on to make several fantastic jokes.
So many jokes. And not only that, but multiple other characters. JT
Yes.
and her boss.
Yes. Yeah.
I forget his name.
Eh.
Spike or Mark or something.
Yeah.
You know,
Mike or Mark.
a go-go dancer club owner guy name. But yeah, no, they're all like, you should be a comedian. You're funny. You're really
funny.
funny.
Yeah.
Like everybody else who
But-
like just meet her
but-
are like ready to believe in her.
Is it like you're funny because like because she is like a woman who is like not taking any shit and
Yeah.
like standing up for herself and like telling people to fuck off, you know?
Mhm.
And it's like, you're hilarious. Like, you're obviously meaning this as a joke, you know?
Well, I mean, JT says it after her shit-eating grin joke.
Yeah, that was a
Which
good
is
one.
a really good joke.
That was a good one, yeah.
See this?
Yeah.
It's a shit-eating grin.
I like how she does the smile like very quickly and it
Yeah.
goes away. It's like, you know what that was? You know? I was like,
Yeah.
oh, please inform me. What was that?
Yeah, no, it's a good setup.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's some red flags from El Rey.
I have more to say about Ray and Cherry, but I think it's interesting with the doctor's block. It's interesting because, yeah, there's definitely an abuse dynamic in their relationship, but they're also strangely and unusually equal in their power, right? Like, they're both doctors.
Oh, yeah.
Dakota is a anesthesiologist, which
Girl is getting paid.
is intense. Anesthesiology is an intense field, right?
Yeah, no, you can't get that wrong.
Yeah. And, you know, they're like working the same shift, you know, like they're working together. It really seems like in that instance, they're pretty like, you know, it's not like one has a significantly greater income than another or other like obligations in their life or anything like that. So,
Yeah,
and then they have a son.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing about abuse. It can be so like insidious.
Yeah. And not obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when I was researching this, it was like looking into it. It was really interesting how much of and I didn't write down any of these article names, that we're kind of going over like a plot synopsis of the film, right? You know, pretty surface level stuff, nothing like particularly deep. Otherwise I would have remembered the name of the article and referenced it.
Yeah.
But it was interesting how many I came across that like refer to Dakota Block and that character as like unfaithful and like kind of giving her like a psycho bisexual spin because
I do. Yeah.
she is trying to leave Bill
Yeah.
for
Fergie,
obviously.
I mean, who wouldn't?
Yeah, right. She knows about cars.
Yeah. Early 2000s lesbian Fergie who knows about cars.
Yes.
Hello.
And yeah, so it was really interesting. And I was like, don't put this on Dakota.
Yeah.
Like, Bill's a fucking asshole.
Yeah, no, he is straight up abusive. She is fully, like, afraid of him.
Yeah.
She is leaving because she is afraid of him, not because she fell in love with somebody else.
And he's also very weird around their kid, right? Because, like, when they're getting ready that, like, evening to go to work, and he, like, tells them to, like, pray for daddy that there won't be any dead bodies, you know? And I was like, that's a weird thing to ask your kid to do. Also, you're a physician. Like, death is an aspect of your job. I don't know.
But I mean, you hope it won't be.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So I guess that's it. I mean, I think it's supposed to be. It could be. There's a way that could be a sort of nice thing, I guess. I mean, it's,
Yeah, but...
of just sort of like, hope that your day goes well and
Yeah,
that you're
yeah,
able to treat everybody and it's all great, you
but,
know.
like, literally asking your young son, like...
to pray for no dead
no
bodies.
dead bodies. Like, okay.
Yeah.
That's weird.
It
but
is
okay.
weird.
And what really gets me is like, you know, when the hospital is like overrun with patients who are showing symptoms of this thing, like the gross boils and all that stuff. And something, I don't remember exactly what happens that sets it off, but Josh Brolin's character is like, fucking Wednesdays.
Yeah.
Like, are you trying to tell me that this is something you've experienced before? That, like, this is not completely out of the ordinary for you and you're not, like, freaking out a little bit? Like, your response is, ugh, Wednesdays.
Right. No, the one time that we see him lose his cool, actually, is when they find Fergie's dead body.
Yes.
We will keep referring to her as Fergie instead of whatever her character's name is.
I don't know what her
she definitely has one.
Is. It's probably just Stacy, because she is credited as Stacy Ferguson by her name.
But I'm pretty sure her character does have a name.
Tammy.
Anyway, his one time when he loses his cool is when he sees Fergie, aka Tammy's, dead body. And that's when he has the little thermometer in his mouth that he's been sort of chewing on.
Yeah.
And that he uses to, like, see how he's doing. Because he clearly has, like, a temper.
Yeah.
As in, like, he gets angry and violent.
I don't understand what, like, a mercury thermometer is going to, like, what information that will convey to him.
Yeah, it's supposed to be telling him, he says it's to tell him if he's keeping his cool or not.
Okay. But, like, don't you think, like,
that
blood pressure
would be better
monitor
for that.
would make more sense
but
for
it's
that?
So we can have the great scene where he sees Fergie's body and then he bites down on it and there's glass in his mouth.
Yeah. And then gross drool. But yeah, whatever.
But it's interesting. Like, all of this stuff in the hospital, it's fine, but realizing his wife is probably still cheating on him is the thing where he freaks out. He's clearly a guy who has, anger control issues.
Yeah.
And that he knows it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's always a good start, but it's a start, right? And then you need to, like, go from there, right?
Oh my God. Another moment of him being kind of an asshole, though also more understandable. But they do it pretty early on, I think. When they realize that it's some sort of infectious disease. I think before it even becomes, like, a zombie problem. Yeah. The other doctor who's with him is like, anything you recommend? And he's like, self-preservation?
Self-preservation comes to mind. Yeah. And I was like, well, you're not wrong.
Yeah, but also you're a doctor.
Yeah.
This is your job.
Yeah.
When you come across a disease, I'm pretty sure that there are, like, steps that you take as a doctor. Quarantining, like, I don't know.
What I found really interesting is that in those hospital scenes, it's, like, obvious the shit is going down very quickly.
Yeah.
And, like, things are evolving rapidly. And, like, the hospital workers just still seem to be, like, keeping their cool.
For a while.
And I'm like, what are you guys doing? Like, everybody's coming in with these gross boils, and, like, you just, like, had to cut that guy's arm off.
I know. Like, no, immediate calls to the CDC. Come on.
Yeah,
this is, like, an issue.
It's obviously pre-COVID, obviously. Yeah. And I was like, where are their masks? Where are the gowns? Where are the,
I mean, even then.
Where's the PPE? Call the CDC. What's happening right now?
I mean, I'm pretty sure we've always had protocols for, like, infectious diseases breaking out in hospitals.
Yeah, I guess
hospitals have always been prepared for that.
Apparently not this hospital in a small town in Texas.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of fair.
Yeah. And then we also have a lot of law enforcement and authority figures in this film.
Yes.
Right? So we've got, like...
We have our sheriff.
We've got the sheriff and several deputies.
Yeah. A lot of which are just kind of cannon fodder.
Yeah. And then we also have, obviously, everybody in the military, because they're meant to be near a military base, right? And so... as far as, like, the relationships between the men and the women, right, there's, like, a lot of abuse dynamics, but, like, it's not that much better, the dynamics between the men.
No, I'm pretty sure that, like, the men in this film don't know how to be in, like, any type of relationship, like, romantic, platonic, familial, employment-wise. Like, they don't know how to do any sort of relationship without there being some sort of, like, power play dynamic going on.
Right.
Like, there always has to be somebody sort of struggling against the other, or somebody over the other.
Which, to me, is, like, totally exemplified so beautifully in, like, really one of the first scenes with Naveen Andrews' character, Abby. His, like, obsession with, like, collecting other men's testicles.
I mean,
and keeping them in a jar for his collection. And, like, it's just so... obvious that, like, just this is, like, there's no other way for me to understand that as some, like, toxic masculinity bullshit, right?
Yeah.
It's, like, a way of gaining or keeping the control or domination over other men, right?
It's, emasculating.
By castrating people who, like, fall out of favor with him, because, like, that's what the guy whose, like, balls get cut off.
It's because he accidentally let some of the subjects escape.
He's, like... I can't remember exactly what he says, but he's like, I'm sick of you.
Yeah.
I don't like you anymore.
You were useful when you were doing your job well, but now you're not even doing your job right.
Right. And then they cut off his testicles, and then Abby pretty quickly after shoots him.
Yeah.
And so it's like, that's a really interesting order of operations. Why castration first, then murder?
To be fair, I think he says, we'll castrate you, and then maybe you'll get to live. if I'm satisfied with that.
Oh, okay.
I think he has something like that.
Okay,
Where he's basically like, if you do it yourself, I might let you live.
Oh,
to
I
like
see.
encourage him to cut off his own balls.
Oh, yeah, another like kind of power play control move. Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Well, and to be fair, the situation changes because he sort of reveals or lets slip that they have more of that toxin.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think Abby was trying to keep under wraps, because that's why Abby and the lieutenant get into it. Why they start fighting is because the lieutenant wants all of the toxin.
Right, because his company, whatever, has been infected, and like the only way to keep them from becoming crazy zombie things is like a small dosage, like constant exposure to the drug. Right?
Yeah, and in his little villain monologue kind of closer to the end, the other thing he says is that like it sort of was the plan to release it in some sort of like small town that people don't really care about, to see who ends up being immune to it, because then they can find the cure in whoever's immune to it. So like the idea was that Abby would be able to sort of study the people who were immune and then find a cure for Muldoon and all of his little soldier boys.
Right.
So like he's doing it all for his men.
Yeah, right. That he like feels like he has some sort of responsibility for, because he's the lieutenant.
Yeah.
And I again still don't understand military
but
rankings.
He's the top of them.
Yeah, he's the top dog.
And that's relevant.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know, your men are all fucking rapists, so let them fucking die.
Yeah, right. And love the reference to having assassinated Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, just throwing it in there.
4 years before he actually dies. Yeah.
Good
stuff. So at least for me, like, it's pretty obvious that everything in this film is like a reference.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm just going to go ahead and quote a completely unrelated podcast, the RuPaul's Drag Race podcast I listen to, All Right, Mary. Shout out to Johnny and Colin. And Colin specifically, but I think it's kind of a thing of the entire podcast, is like, you know, obviously with drag, there's so many references, right? And like reference points, and how that's so important to like the continuation of the culture of drag. You know, what he says a lot is like, if we don't make these references, we lose these references, right? Like, this is a part of our history and we need to keep it alive, right? So there's a ton of references in here, and I want to talk about them and the significance of them and what purpose they serve. But do we want to do literary corner first?
Yeah, I think because we're going to start throwing around the word pastiche a bunch.
So we should probably.
We're going to have a little literary corner where I just sort of tell you what pastiche is and how it gets used in literature and art and other forms of text.
I'll be honest, before this, like, I had heard the word pastiche, but like I couldn't tell you what it meant. Yeah.
It's French by way of the Italian.
Fair enough, yeah.
Coming from like little meat pies.
Oh.
And like other kind of pastries like that have a bunch of different types of fillings in them.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting. I feel like in the past when I've heard the word pastiche, it's been used with negative connotation.
Yeah, which is interesting.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to let you tell me about pastiche.
Right. Well, it's like kind of similar to a parody, which I think also kind of has some negative connotations. Yeah. I mean, it's the sincerest form of flattery.
Yeah, apparently. Yeah.
Really. I mean, sort of all of these things where we're like taking from other people. But I think it's sort of considered to be unoriginal, maybe, which is why it gets some flack. All of these sort of like allusions and these intertextual stuff get some flack for maybe not being as original as some other things, because you're sort of parodying or you're taking up, you know, that it's like, because it's not original, it doesn't count as like a real new work of art.
You know what this is immediately reminding me of?
What?
Is like basically the entire history of hip hop. And the use of sampling.
Yeah.
Sampling of different songs and like using like the hook to then like rap over or like create something new out of.
Yeah.
And getting a lot of that like response of like, well, it's like you're just taking somebody else's thing. Like what are you doing that's new, you know?
Yeah. It's that same thing.
Yeah.
And like parody, like pastiche, I think another thing that makes them maybe why you've heard sort of negative connotations is also that it tends to be a little bit more like humorous. Like parody is very much intentionally meant to be sort of like poking fun at something.
Right, yes, yeah.
Pastiche is sort of the other side of it, where it is, you know, making those references kind of in the same way and in this very sort of joyful, fun, jocular way. But it's like honoring it rather than mocking it.
Yeah.
Is sort of what pastiche is. That's like what they're big difference between parody and pastiches,
Oh,
because
okay.
they can be pretty similar, but one is like, but I love this thing and that's why I'm like taking these pieces from it, whereas parody can be a little more like mocking.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
You
yeah.
know? But they
like
both
a,
can
like
be-
a satire kind of.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So it can be like you're incorporating something specifically from another work of art. It can also just be that you're sort of celebrating a whole genre by making something in that genre, or like
Absolutely.
another writer's writing style. It can also be sometimes when you have a bunch of artists who are sort of like working together, all putting in their own little bits that are all kind of different. That can also be considered a pastiche. Because it is just
Interesting.
sort of like this idea of like blending these different styles together and sort of taking these different pieces together.
Yeah. Wow. That's like exactly what this movie is.
That's exactly what this movie is.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. And
Yeah.
Death Proof for that matter. But
Yeah.
we'll get to that next week.
Yeah. Oh, and also because I used the word intertextuality a little bit ago. It's something that we talk about in our Cabin in the Woods episode, our very first episode. I talk all about intertextuality.
Can you just like remind me in like
Yeah.
a couple sentences?
Yeah, no, it's just how one work of art refers to another work of art.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
That's all it is. The interplay between two texts.
Okay.
Intertextuality.
That's fair.
And, you know, we talked about how, like, pastiche and parody are both examples of intertextuality. And I think in Cabin in the Woods, I talked a lot about illusions.
Yes.
But, like, the difference between that is that, like, an illusion is just sort of like a passing reference that, like, you can kind of blink and miss. Or, like, if you're not familiar with what's being referenced, you might not notice that it's a reference.
Yeah.
But, like, a pastiche is a full recreation in some way. So, like, it doesn't matter as much if the audience knows what the reference is because you're recreating it entirely. So, like, they're going to get all of the beats of it because
Right.
they're seeing it all over again right here.
Okay. Yeah.
You know? Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, I do have some literary examples.
Sure.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead by Tom Stoppard.
yes,
Right? A
yeah.
pastiche of Hamlet, uses some actual lines from Hamlet.
Uh-huh.
And it definitely has, like, a kind of humorous tone. I don't know if you're familiar with David Lodge.
No.
He has a lot of novels, actually, where he sort of takes direct styles from other famous authors. The big one is The British Museum is Falling Down, where he'll have, like, a character say something about Mrs. Dalloway. And then the next chapter will be, I mean, the next paragraph will all be written sort of, like, in the style of Virginia Woolf. You know, he'll do things like that.
Uh-huh.
I've never read Cloud Atlas.
No.
Are you familiar with it? Okay.
No,
But David
sorry.
Mitchell.
Okay.
Apparently, it just swings wildly. It's like, it's a period drama, and then it's a mystery, and then it's Kafkaesque, and then it's a space opera dystopia, and it, like, goes all over the place.
Wow. Okay.
A more, I guess, modern one that I feel like everybody would know because the movie just came out kind of a while ago now, but not too long ago, would be Pride and Prejudice and Zombies.
Oh yeah.
Like,
yeah.
that author, Seth Graham Smith,
Okay.
I think is his name. The book full on has passages written by Jane Austen that he put into his book,
Right.
and then his own passages that are zombies. And then the other thing you can do with pastiche, rather than doing like specific characters or like a specific world, a specific story, you can just sort of have a whole genre that you're sort of doing a send-up of.
Of course. Yeah.
Quentin Tarantino actually is famous for doing pastiches.
Oh, yeah.
Like Kill Bill is just westerns plus kung fu. So I think then all of this is just to say that Planet Terror is a big ol' grindhouse exploitation film pastiche. And
Pastiche?
you're going to tell me
I'm
all
gonna
about
tell you
it.
all about it. Yeah.
Because I don't know.
So speaking of, because you were throwing around the word intertextuality, right?
Yeah.
And we've thrown around the term grindhouse, but
What does that
what the heck is
mean?
that? Because I actually think it's my understanding the full title of this film is Grindhouse Presents Planet Terror.
I think you're right.
Right. So grindhouse, what is it, right? So basically it's a style of theater mainly showing like really low budget horror films or exploitation films.
Oh, like movie theater.
Like a movie theater. Oh, you
I
found
had a
it,
moment
like,
where I was like, Grindhouse were originally plays? Oh. How did they do all of the blood?
because theater. Yes, I get it. Yes, because your definition of theater. That's fair.
No, yeah, but yeah, movie theaters.
Movie
Gotcha.
theaters,
I'm
yes.
on board.
So, and basically the kind of idea where it gets its name, Grindhouse, is like they have a grind policy of just showing movies like back to back, like just stuffing them in there, right?
Oh, I thought it was because like the characters are going through like a grinder.
Oh,
Like they're just killing characters right and left.
I mean, that's fair. But
Yeah.
no, it was like kind of a film programming strategy that dates back, as far as I could tell, the 1920s, right? Just like
Oh.
continually showing films, like really cheap ticket prices,
Hmm.
that usually kind of, it's actually not too far off from the way the movie theaters run today,
was
where
gonna
like
say.
you go see a matinee, it's cheaper. You go
Yeah.
see prime time, it's a little bit more expensive, right?
And also just the general idea of there being movies kind of constantly
Yeah.
playing.
Yeah.
But that's because we have so many more movies now.
That's true, right? So at the time, a lot of the other theaters had a common practice of showing fewer shows per day and charging more depending on where you sat in the theater.
Like a normal, like when you're going to the opera or going
Yeah,
to see a play.
totally.
It's that sort of setup.
Yeah.
And yeah, how you see in like old movies and stuff, you'll often see on the marquee, they'll be like, this movie tonight. And it'll just be like 1 or 2 movies being listed.
Yeah.
Instead of like a whole list of all these different movie posters.
Right, especially maybe because that theater only has so many screens.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the grindhouse theaters, like the point of them is that like they weren't necessarily studio owned. And so grindhouse theaters were like a really fantastic way to skirt around the Hays Code.
The Hays Code.
Which we mentioned in the Cat People episode. You know, with the Hays Code, if a movie didn't quote unquote pass code, it really had a much more limited release and like limited opportunities as to where it could be shown, right?
Yeah.
And so grindhouse theaters are one of them, right? So which is why like grindhouse theaters would show like a variety of stuff. They would show like straight up pornography, but like they would also show like fancy smancy European art house films, you know, that like didn't pass code for other reasons.
Because they
right?
had like a moment of nudity that wasn't like sexual but was just there, or like a drug use or something.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe like a suicide or something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
A queer person, perhaps.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So grindhouse is like a good way to get around that, right? And so grindhouse kind of had its heyday in like I would say the 1970s specifically as exploitation films are becoming more and more popular, and I'll talk about that momentarily. But nowadays, like everybody's just crazy busy, you know. There's a million things on TV and a lot of it's really good, right? And like we've got, you know, like jobs and stuff.
Right, yeah.
But
yeah, even just in terms of movies, like yes, you could go to the theater, but a lot of these movies are like straight to streaming.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like you can just watch these things at home.
So, you know, thinking about it, and this is something I've heard, I think probably heard like Stephen King talking about this before, that like in the 50s and 60s, like on a Saturday, you would like grab a couple dimes and you could just hang out at the movie theater like all day.
Yeah.
You know, for just like a dime, right? And so this is kind of a similar thing. Like the idea of a grindhouse double feature is like you would pay one ticket price, usually the same price for one movie to see 2 movies, right? And so at the time, be like, heck yeah, that's a steal, right? And now it's just like, oh my god, I have to sit through 2 movies. I don't have that kind of time,
Right, yeah.
you know?
Can you imagine?
Can you
Even though
imagine?
I will sit there and binge an entire TV series.
Exactly.
But I'm not going to sit there and watch 2 movies outside of my own home.
Exactly. So there's definitely like grindhouse comes with a very specific culture, right? And it is also very specifically American, right? There's a little Canadian in there, but like the idea of grindhouse and like the idea of lower ticket prices, being able to go in and pay like one flat rate and see a multitude of movies is a really American thing. So these grindhouse films, like they would show like really quite a large variety of film, like I was just mentioning, right? And what they would specifically show is something called exploitation films, right? An exploitation film is basically a film that tries to succeed financially by kind of exploiting current trends and like lurid content, right? So definitely exploiting current trends, maybe playing on like some societal anxieties depending on the era, right? Exploitation films are generally low quality kind of B movies, right? But they were also like really influential. Like they set a lot of trends. They can attract critical attention and become really historically important.
Right, that makes sense because they were specifically trying to latch on to the already existing trends of the time.
Yeah.
And they could turn it out a lot faster than the more like prestigious films.
Exactly. Yeah. Than like a studio film, right?
Yeah, because they were just sort of low budget, let's do it.
Yeah, and there's plenty of exploitation films that have like really significant cult followings. I'm thinking of Superfly specifically. So, but also the idea, because, you know, we talked about how this grindhouse being a double feature with Planet Terror and Death Proof. And apparently there was a reasoning as to why Planet Terror was shown first and then Death Proof.
I'm curious.
Yeah, basically the idea is that like the second feature, like you want to get people in to stick around for a double feature, right? So you want to show the like quote unquote weaker film first. And the stronger one second, kind of as like a reward. And you know, Tarantino just has like a much bigger name and like is much more bankable and more financially successful.
That's really interesting.
Than a lot of Robert Rodriguez stuff, which is funny because he directed Spy Kids.
I know, right?
Yeah.
That's enough for me. I don't need to know anything else about him.
Yeah.
Spy Kids.
Spy Kids. Also from Dusk Till Dawn with Tarantino, one of Tarantino's first movies.
Great film.
So it's meant to be like fun, you know, but like sometimes, you know, Tarantino's movies can be like a little bit polarizing, right? People talk about him a lot, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so they figured because of Tarantino's greater commercial success that Death Proof would be shown second. Which what I've kind of been hearing is like doing the research around this is that a lot of people, at least the ones who have communicated
have opinions online.
Have opinions and have said so online or on their own podcast or whatever, are saying that Planet Terror should have been second.
Because they like it more.
Because they like
it's
it
the
more.
better movie.
They think it's a better movie, yeah. Or not that it's necessarily a better movie, but it's more fun and more entertaining.
Yeah. And I do think even when people talk about like Quentin Tarantino films, Death Proof isn't really one that comes up a lot as like...
No. As a matter of fact, like I was listening to a couple of podcasts, you know, like listening to other people talk about Planet Terror, and one person on one of the podcasts was like, I think Death Proof's the only Tarantino movie I haven't seen. And I'm like, wow, you're really missing out, man. It's amazing.
Such a good fucking movie.
It's so good. Yeah.
It's my favorite Tarantino movie.
That's a toughie for me.
I know that's a lot harder for you. But no, it is my favorite.
Yeah. No, it's so good. And we will talk about it next time.
I know. We got to hold ourselves down. But that is interesting. Because I do think that Planet Terror did a better job of being, well, you'll tell me if it actually did a better job of being a grindhouse film or like an exploitation film.
Yeah.
You know, but just to me watching it, it feels a lot more like kind of genre and like kind of dated and just sort of like fun and wacky and silly and sort of like it's having a lot of fun with itself.
Yeah.
Whereas Death Proof feels more like just on its own, being its own sort of film.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is also making a bunch of references
oh my God, so many references
that I'm just not picking up on, but I feel like it stands on its own a lot better than Planet Terror does. I feel like the whole time I was watching Planet Terror, I was like, that's probably a reference to something. That's probably a reference to something. This is all a genre I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
And while that's still being true when you've seen Death Proof, you still like...
I was still just like, I can enjoy Death Proof just on its own.
On its own, without understanding all of these references.
Yeah. So I can kind of see why people think that Planet Terror is better, because it sort of does the assignment better.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I would make an argument that they're both really fantastic examples of exploitation films, just in different ways, you know.
We will talk about it more when we talk about Death Proof, because I'm excited to hear about that.
Yeah. So we can do a nice little setup right now. So some things to keep in mind for next time.
Yeah.
So basically everything in this movie and everything about this movie, Planet Terror, is a reference. Right?
Yeah.
References to what I would assume are probably really precious and formative childhood memories.
Right.
For Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
Which I love for them.
Good for you, babies.
And you know, who can say anything different about themselves? Again, those like formative kind of childhood, adolescent memories still like being incredibly important and like relevant to ourselves and like our personalities, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the things that show up in my writing are the things that I read back when I was in like high school. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. And like, I still have, I try to expand my music tastes in like every direction of different genres, but like, man, I got a soft spot for the stuff I listened to when I was 14,
right?
You know, and I still listen to it all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just like, yeah, but it's special, you know. It's special because it just got there when
it needed to,
when our brains were just doing a lot of stuff and just like really got locked in there. Yeah.
Yep.
So, you know, I imagine that, you know, really not knowing much about the biography of Robert Rodriguez or Tarantino, like I can imagine that they probably spent a shit ton of time in movie theaters or watching film in some capacity.
Renting some VHSs.
Yeah. Specifically exploitation and really violent movies about like guns, cars, sex.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of stuff. So I think really important thing about exploitation is that like it is really loosely defined and much more to do with our perception as the viewer of the film than like the film's actual content or like explicit messaging, you know?
Okay.
Because the material that's like a little bit more lurid, maybe titillating, you know, can coexist with like artistic content. Like those two can
Oh, yeah.
be together, right? Yet we see that with the fact that like a lot of those art films that we were just talking about like failed to pass Hays Code, right?
Yeah.
So they were often shown in those same theaters as like those exploitation films, right?
Right.
So there are a ton of exploitation subgenres.
Yeah.
Let me just go over a couple of them very quickly.
Sure.
The cautionary films, Reefer Madness, for example.
Oh, yeah,
right?
Reefer
A really
Madness.
great way to get around Hays Code, right? By showing drug use or sex or something as a cautionary tale, right? Don't do this. And show, like, you know, a cautionary tale to show, like, the dangers of drug use and premarital sex, right?
Right, yeah.
That
Though
kind
it
of
also
thing.
gets to show all the fun, too.
And then the fun, yeah.
Yeah. But they'll die in the end, don't worry.
Right, they'll repent, yeah.
Yeah.
Biker films, so, like, movies about biker gangs. You know, that kind of thing. Blaxploitation, right?
Yeah, I feel like that's the one I'm most, like, familiar with in terms of having heard about it.
It's interesting.
Those sort of like race exploitation films.
Oh yeah, and
like
there's
blaxploitation.
There's
and
blaxploitation. It's called. I did not name it this. It's called redsploitation for like Native Americans.
Ooh.
There's Canucksploitation for Canadians. There's like Jacksploitation for South Africans. Like there's it's all kinds of stuff. Yeah. Because every like culture has its own anxieties, you know, and like things to play off of and exploit. So I think makes sense.
In America, it probably makes sense that like blaxploitation films got really big around that time because it was also the time when we were really into like white people were really into other forms of like black entertainment in this sort of like underground edgy kind of way, you know, of like being into the like rock and roll or like whatever, you know, all of those kind of art forms that black people make and then white people want to take over. It makes sense that they would be like, yeah, I want to watch Blackula or whatever,
right? And it's interesting because in a lot of blaxploitation films, you know, like there's a really prominent theme of like black, specifically Americans, right? Because this is a very like American culture thing, overcoming a really hostile authority figure through violence, you know? Like Shaft, right? And it's interesting because some blaxploitation films were created by like black creators, like black filmmakers, you know, directors, editors, all that stuff. But sometimes they would be made with like a black cast, but like a white production crew,
and
right?
That's
like,
a very different
it's
vibe.
very, very different, right?
It's a very different vibe.
But both of those kinds of films are considered blaxploitation, right? We get cannibal films, movies about cannibalism, obviously very taboo, right? Carsploitation.
Oh, that's a big one.
Right, yeah. Lots of cars, car racing, car crashing, you know, fancy smancy sports cars, muscle cars, blah, blah, blah,
Which
blah,
is
blah.
another, once again, very American thing.
Nobody
does cars, not in terms of like making cars, but like the car culture that we have in America.
Exactly.
Because we have so many roads, so many like distances that we have to go across.
Yeah, the country is gigantic.
Space to do things like street racing.
Yeah. So, you know, big examples of this are Vanishing Point and Two Lane Blacktop, which are explicitly referenced in Death Proof.
Oh,
so carsploitation is Death Proof is a really fantastic example of a carsploitation.
Yeah,
film.
once you say that, it's like, oh yeah, of course Death Proof is a reference to that shit.
Of course, yeah. And then we also have this kind of like Italian-made slasher film called Giallo films. That's my best Italian accent.
I liked it.
That focuses on like really cruel murders and like the subsequent kind of search for the killer. This is where Dario Argento makes his name, who is a very famous Italian horror director.
He's definitely a familiar name to me, at least.
We also have monster movies, kind of this idea of nature run amok, you know, especially post World War II with like concerns about nuclear weapon testing, right? Which is how we get Godzilla.
Yeah, he's the big one.
And you know, there's a whole variety of films from the 50s of just like gigantic animals, you know. There's Nazi exploitation.
Gotta have the Nazi exploitation. That's why you also have the in the fake trailers that we have at the beginning of Grindhouse. There's the one that's like SS werewolf ladies, Nazi lady werewolves. I forget what it is.
All of that are references to different exploitation films. Yep, absolutely. Yeah. We also get revenge films, right? Specifically rape revenge films.
Yeah.
You know, I Spit on Your Grave, right? Our girl Carol J. Clover comes back for this one. She has a little bit in her book, Men, Women, and Chance House, right? examining the implication of like the reversal of cinema's understanding of traditional gender roles in these revenge films. It's kind of an offshoot of a vigilante film with, you know, the victim's kind of like transformation into an avenger, like hunted and hunter
Right.
kind of thing, you know.
Which I imagine is why we have the scene in this film where Rose McGowan's character Cherry is like almost raped and then instead kills her would-be rapist.
Yeah, so good. Sexploitation. Duh. You know, like movies that resemble in part or whole like softcore pornography, nudity or semi-nudity specifically for women. The sexploitation films also have a lot of like lesbian sex scenes, right?
Oh, yeah.
And they've been studied for the context of like the political and social implications of lesbianism and women's sexuality in this time. It's something that kind of remains a concern of feminist critique of film. So a lot of these sexploitation films, like super male gazy.
Yeah, right.
you know,
Yeah.
I
Of course.
feel like that goes without saying. Another one really important and actually relevant to Planet Terror is women in prison films.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
People are really into that for some reason.
Yeah, it's a really popular subgenre.
Yeah.
They usually contain nudity, lesbianism, sexual assault, like sexual humiliation and sadism,
Yeah.
and like kind of rebellion among, you know, like quote unquote captive women, you know. And that's like its own thing. Women in prison is like its own subgenre of exploitation film.
Which is then also how we get movies, TV shows like Orange is the New Black and
Exactly.
Wentworth,
Yeah.
which are like women in prison, lesbian sex. Yeah.
Yeah. Slasher films. We've talked about slasher films before. They're an example of an exploitation film. Spaghetti westerns, right? These are Italian-made westerns that start to really emerge in the mid-1960s. And they're different from the other westerns of the time because they're much more violent and a little bit more amoral. The characters are not necessarily like good guy, bad guy kind of thing, right? More than in comparison to like a typical Hollywood western, right? So great
that's
examples
interesting.
are The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Once Upon a Time in the West. Quentin Tarantino has directed 2 tributes to this genre, Django Unchained
Yep.
and The Hateful Eight.
Yeah. Though I think he brings up a little bit of a Western flair in a lot of his films.
Very much so, yeah. Yeah, even in Kill Bill, like,
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a Western flair, yeah. Splatter films, right, just like gory films that focus on like graphic portrayals of gore and violence, right?
Would you consider Evil Dead to be an exploitation film?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Because it seems like that's sort of what it was. It was so gory and like
yeah, super gory, and I think also
and low budget and quick.
low budget. And another subgenre of exploitation films are zombie films.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
And early zombie films date back to like the 1930s, but those zombies are much more in like the Haitian cultural
the
tradition,
traditional-
like a mind controlled, like enslaved person, rather than like
something's back from the dead.
yeah, an undead
infecting,
thing. Yeah.
yeah.
But it's all kind of considered the same genre, even though over the course, like, even though those early kind of more like mind-controlled slave genre of zombie film evolves over the next 30 years to create the zombie films that we know more today, right?
What we more think of zombies now when we just have a zombie in our head.
Right. So having gone over all of those different subgenres, and that's not even all of them, right?
yeah.
There's so many others. But those are like really, really main ones. Which ones did you kind of recognize as like, oh yeah, that happens in Planet Terror?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them.
A lot of them. Yeah.
I mean, I see what you were saying about the women in prison where we do have this moment of Cherry and Dakota locked up. We definitely have, I mean, it's a zombie one. It's gory. They go a little over top with it.
Oh yeah, it's super splattery. Like
Yeah.
they're shooting bullets that take off entire limbs.
Yeah. There's the
heads are exploding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the gag where they find JT, they think dead and covered in
yes.
blood, but it
Yes.
turns out, oh no, it was just the barbecue sauce.
and
It looks like his dog is eating his guts, but that was just like sausage
It was just
links.
sausage. And
Yeah,
then
so
he-
they're like playing with the idea of the gory.
Yeah, and then he takes a bite and he's like, "That's good," and I'm
Yeah.
like, "Please stop!" But
Oh
yeah.
my god, the one that kills me, the one that I hate, but that feels very much like an exploitation thing, is the part so needlessly, where the dog falls out of their car and then gets eaten up by
the dog.
It's just like
yeah.
that. The dog didn't need to be in this film in the first place.
It really didn't,
and then
yeah.
gets killed off in the most like sort of like nowhere, just off to the side way.
Yeah.
That is just sort of like, oh,
And
that was just there because you're like, we're gonna have a little dog death.
and splatters all over the crazy babysitting twins.
Yeah,
right, yeah.
That it just it felt very
And a little bit of car exploitation as well. Like, a lot of cars just kind of explode as, like, a punchline.
Right,
you
yeah.
know?
And it's like a big deal that JT has, for some reason, at his barbecue place, a really cool motorcycle and a really cool car.
Yeah.
You know, and Ray has his wrecker. And it's like this whole thing.
Obviously, you know, we do see a little bit of sexploitation in this film as well.
Yeah.
The very opening scene of Rose McGowan go-go dancing during the opening credits.
Which goes on for so long.
Really, really long, right? And it's just like, okay, so we're getting semi-nude women dancing suggestively.
Another thing that I saw just sort of in my reading, my research about this film, is that why the missing reel comes up specifically where it does, is that it was like a common myth, maybe not real, but maybe real, in Grindhouse, that often the sex scenes were the ones that would, the part of the film that would get grainy and degrade quickest, because often people would just replay that scene over and over again.
And so they would degrade and
or
catch
like,
on fire.
Even specifically that the workers there would like splice it out to keep for their own collection. And so like that's why that's the part that's missing in Planet Terror, is because that sort of idea of that getting, you know, watched over and over again, or like stolen out. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So obviously Planet Terror is a film with like a crazy long list of references to these kinds of like 60s, 70s, 80s exploitation
it
films,
is
right?
a pastiche.
It's a pastiche, yes.
That's what it is setting out to do, is sort of pay tribute to
and
all of these exploitation movies.
In the grindhouse tradition of film, right? And so, but these films are inherently made from the white male perspective.
Right.
And while sometimes they do play on kind of the anxieties of the general American population, like atomic testing, communism, the space race, violence and crime, you know, good old fashioned kids these days sort of thing, you know. But really more specifically, like, these are from the perspective of like a white man's fear of like the status quo being disrupted, right? And like societal breakdowns in like traditional gender roles, and like people of color taking revenge on white authority figures, right? You know? But Planet Terror is a movie made in the 21st century, right? So it does, I still see a lot of like the 21st century American culture in it, specifically post 2001. But obviously we do still see it fall victim to playing into like those really like misogynistic and racist and also ableist tropes.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I mean, I think it's also important to point out that like Robert Rodriguez is Mexican American.
This is true. Yes.
Right? So it's specifically not coming from a white man's perspective, right?
Yes.
But it is drawing on all of these same like racist tropes, and
there's a lot of people who were like on set during this film that say that it was basically co-directed by Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah.
So like he also has a pretty big say in it as well. Yeah. But yeah, and I mean, like, we also haven't even talked about the random weird scene where like there's that doctor who's taking the guy's arm off.
Oh yeah, the one like, Asian dog, the only Asian character, I'm pretty sure.
I think so, yeah, who like has subtitles for some reason.
Even though he's speaking English and it's perfectly clear.
You can understand him. Yeah, and it's like, why does he have subtitles? And I meant to like look into it.
Yeah, I assumed
in my research I couldn't find anything.
I assumed it was a Grindhouse joke about like othering of the Asian character, and like the idea that the average white dude isn't going to be able to understand him because he quote unquote has an accent.
I also felt like as Lieutenant Muldoon is kind of explaining to El Rey what is happening, right? And he like takes off his mask and he's kind of devolving into like a gross mess, right? And Ray and who else is it?
Abby is there with him.
Abby shoots. Yeah. Lieutenant Muldoon. Ray like thanks him for his service to the country. And like I think he even says like God bless you and like thank you for your service to this country. Yeah. And then like shoots him. And I'm just like, I don't know, something about that is like very much playing on our modern anxieties and like the war on terror and stuff. You know?
Yeah, I mean the whole Osama bin Laden thing, the whole fact that Abby himself is very clearly Middle Eastern as a character.
Yes.
The character, see, what I do sometimes when I want to get better notes is I actually try to find copies of the script.
Yeah.
Which they're not always exactly the same as the movie we end up with.
That's true.
What was interesting about this one is that Abby, the character, was written to always be wearing a turban.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, oh, so they just, okay.
And I don't actually really know anything about Naveen Andrews' like actual genetics.
I know he's English.
It does kind of make me feel like, yeah, but where are you really from?
Yeah,
you know,
he's British.
He's British, yeah.
Yeah. But it's just, he clearly was cast to play a Middle Eastern character and like a Muslim character.
Yeah.
Those are the fears. It's definitely, it was in the script. I didn't catch it if it was in the movie. You watched it more recently. You might know where JT specifically like doesn't trust Abby because he's like Muslim and like makes some side comments about it. Is that in the movie? It was in the original script.
This.
I think they played down some of the anti-Muslim stuff.
Good.
Yeah, because I was like, turban? No. And then JT was just like, no, you can't trust those guys. And I was just like,
Biochemical engineers?
Yeah.
Them? I don't know. And also, I think there's also a lot of like ableism in this film, especially when Sherry loses her leg.
Yeah.
Right, you know.
Absolutely.
And it's also worth noting that there's a reference to Jesse James in this film. We were just talking about JT's fancy smancy.
Oh, right. Yeah, he says he got the motorcycle like custom made because Jesse James really loved his barbecue or whatever, so he like made him a custom motorcycle or something.
Right, but like, are you familiar with Jesse James?
Only in passing.
Okay, so
and also that it's the name of the Pokemon Team Rocket characters that
Jesse and James, yes,
are the only things that I care about in Pokemon.
So Jesse James was married to Sandra Bullock for a while. It's one of those, like, this happened however long ago that was, like over a decade now, where like there was this quote unquote curse of women who won Best Actress Oscars. That like within the year after winning their Best Actress Oscars, their like husband would leave them or like they would get divorced. Right?
I honestly believed that.
Yeah.
Because men hate to see a woman on top.
And so Sandra Bullock was married to Jesse James. They were married for a while, and then like they get divorced, and like over the course of I'm not trying to like pay attention to celebrities' love lives. I am a Sandra Bullock fan though.
Yeah.
That like he was all of a sudden like hanging out with like girls with like neo-Nazi tattoos. And honestly, like I could probably be more up to date on this situation, but like sounds like he was making some pretty poor choices and like hanging out with like well-known like white supremacists.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought Jesse James was like an old cowboy name.
It is also that. Yeah.
Okay. But obviously that's not who they're referencing in this movie because no old cowboy was coming up to this place and loving the barbecue.
Right. I just have one more thing I wanted to mention about this, and then we can get into the themes.
Sure.
So I found this article written by it was like a horrorgeeklife.com.
Oh yeah, love that place.
Love that place. The author is John Odette. So this is just straight up a quote from what he says. It says, "Planet Terror succeeds due to its self-awareness," which we've talked a little bit about, right? It knows what it is and what it's trying to say.
Yeah.
The Mexican exploitation motif is dynamite in Rodriguez's hands.
Right.
The spare parts of the 70s grindhouse features blend well, and the writer-director has created a homogeneous rendition of them. These components include the aforementioned gore and the objectification / adoration of women.
Mm-hmm.
It transplants the viewer not to a time period, but a particular experience. Planet Terror is a love letter to the past, but it shares its remembered passion with uninhibited earnestness.
Yeah.
And I just like the way that John Odette said that. And I was like, you know what, John, I'm just going to directly quote you on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what I kind of meant when I was talking about pastiche.
Yeah.
How, you said you're kind of used to hearing it with negative connotations, but the thing is that it tends to be really earnestly in love with what it's referencing. Yeah. And sometimes earnestness can be a little bit hokey and corny and just sort of silly.
Yeah.
But it also can be really beautiful and fun and wonderful. Yeah. And I think in this case it is. You just do get a sense of joy from this film. And everybody involved, well, maybe not everybody involved. We can talk more about Rose McGowan's situation in a second. But that, like, most of the people involved with this film were just sort of there to have a good time.
Yeah, and I think they did. But you know what I'm now realizing is, like, how much I'm also, like, making connections to drag as we're talking about this, right? And especially, like, with pastiche and, like, making the reference and her name being Cherry Darling and it all being part of hyper femininity. It's just, like, it's just reminding me a lot of drag, honestly. Like, this movie's, like, an exploitation film in drag, kind of.
That's an interesting kind of way to think of it.
Yeah.
That it is, I mean, there's an extent to which the masculinity of it is so over the top.
Right.
That it does feel kind of draggy.
Yeah.
Like, its obsession with, like, penises and, like, testicles.
And testicles.
It's, like,
my
weird.
God.
I mean, because beyond just, like, Abby's little collection that he's keeping.
Yeah.
we also have in our first like hospital scene where they're just sort of like trying to figure out what this disease is, and you have the guy in the background looking through diseases, and they talk for a while about like somebody's penis that they had to amputate.
Oh yeah, and like they show it, and like we don't need to really be looking at that, you know.
And near the end of the rape scene,
oh yeah, as Quentin Tarantino's penis is like melting off.
Yeah, because he's been infected, and so it's just like this weird sort of over the top, obsession with masculinity that does start to feel kind of draggy because it's all just like gender as a performance.
Also, just like a couple, I want to just, in case you weren't aware, a couple of like the references or homages. The fact that Tom Savini has a role in this film, like Tom Savini is like very well regarded as like pretty much on the vanguard of particularly horror movie special effects.
Oh, yeah, when we were watching, you talked about he was like the deputy.
Yeah.
We see him, he's the one who gets his finger bit off.
He gets his finger bit off, and then he gets like torn apart, like drawn and quartered. Right? Yeah. So he's just a very well known, very well regarded, and highly respected horror movie special effects guy. You know. The film is made to look damaged. Apparently 5 of the 6 film reels were like edited with real film damage and like stock footage, you know. Dr. Block's thigh holster is it's a reference, so that's why it's there, because we're like, what, does she have a thigh holster?
Because she's like a fancy doctor with all of her like different needles that she has,
and then she's
in her
got
pockets,
like a little syringe gun to like
have on her thigh. I'm like, when as a doctor do you need that?
It's a reference. The music is incredibly reminiscent of John Carpenter, who you know is like, you know, a very famous and well regarded horror director and a composer as well. If you've seen Halloween, have you seen Halloween?
I have not seen Halloween yet.
Do that.
Yeah, that's also on the list.
You'll hear the music and you'll be like, oh yeah, super John Carpenter, Quentin Tarantino is watching a trailer for a real film called Women in Cages.
Oh,
which is an infamous women in prison film.
Yeah.
You know, what some of the things they say in the trailer are ridiculous. It's like white flesh on the black market.
Oh God.
Yeah, did you not catch that?
No.
Yeah, it's bad. Yeah.
Ew.
Yeah, I know it's bad. And then we already talked about it. The missing reel is like a total joke, you know, cuts the sex scene short, and, you know, all of a sudden all of the characters are wearing different clothes. There's like new characters in the barbecue place that weren't there before.
Yeah. We don't know about
it's all on
background.
Fire.
Yeah. Oh, another one that I heard that was a reference was specifically the cameo of Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
That it was a big thing where they would have like a big name actor in the trailer, but he would only be on set to film for like one day.
Yeah.
So he wouldn't be in a lot of scenes, and noticeably they would cut it together so that he never actually had to share a scene with anybody else. Which happened a lot. So you would get this big name actor, but you wouldn't have to pay very much for him.
Right.
Because you would just bring him one day, you'd shoot all of his scenes in a row.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even have to deal with the other actors.
Yeah.
You would just cut them in later. And so that's why Bruce Willis's character, you basically never see him share a screen with anybody.
That's true.
It's always like people talking to him, and it will cut to him and stuff. And why he doesn't actually have a big role in it is because he's supposed to be like the big face you see in the trailer to get everybody in to see the movie.
Yeah.
And then there isn't actually much
like
to see.
Like Drew Barrymore in Scream.
Yeah, very much like that. It's also why in the trailer, the fake trailers that they have, I forget which one it is. Is it also the dumb Nazi one that has like somebody as Fu Manchu?
Yes,
that's like a big name actor.
Yes, it's fucking Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, it's like as like Fu Manchu.
Yeah,
and it's just like
I hate this. I know it's a reference. I don't like it.
Yeah, it's all supposed to be a big joke.
Yeah.
But it's like,
well, actually, I did learn about this, that like Bruce Willis had worked with Robert Rodriguez before and was just like, anything you got for me, like I want to work with you again, you know. And so he was just like, hey, you want to do this, right? And like I said, Quentin Tarantino was like pretty active on set of this film, you know, and like sees and has worked with Bruce Willis before. He's in Pulp Fiction, right? And was like, we can't afford Bruce Willis. How did you get Bruce Willis? And he's like, it's doing him a solid, you know, just doing a friend a favor kind of thing.
Oh, so, that's cool.
Yeah, that is fun.
I was wondering, since we've been talking about exploitation films and we sort of briefly brought up how this seems like everybody's having a lot of fun. Yeah. Do we actually want to talk about the behind the scenes stuff with Rose McGowan?
I would love to. I've got a lot on here.
You want to process some feelings about Rose McGowan?
Yeah, I just want her to be happy.
I guess because one of the things that I have, we're going to talk about like borders in a little bit and sort of like their mutability, their malleability, how they're insufficient and stuff. And like one of the borders that I had, these sort of like supposedly sort of diametrically opposed things, but that actually have really thin lines, one of them that I think I want to bring up now is like the sort of line between exploitation and empowerment.
Yes.
Where you have these like these rape revenge films.
Yeah, blaxploitation.
Yeah, and it's like, is this empowering?
Yes.
Or is this exploitative? And I think that's why we get these rape revenge films that on one hand can be like, oh, she's coming back. She's going to kill them people that have hurt her. Like, oh, look at her go. She's so powerful.
Yeah.
All of those revenge films. But at the same time.
She's the Avenger now.
Yeah.
She's
but at the
hunter,
same
not the
time, we had
hunted.
to start with that scene of her being like abused.
Yeah.
And in this case, we have this very real history with Rose McGowan.
Yeah. So what I learned, which, you know, is interesting, and I feel like the intention is good, but like the impact is maybe not what he wanted. But like Robert Rodriguez was like dating Rose McGowan at the time that they made this film, and he was like, I want Rose McGowan in this film, right? And he knew that he did that knowing that it would make Harvey really mad.
Right, yeah.
Right. But he does it anyway.
And I feel like everybody knows about the history between Rose McGowan and Harvey Weinstein, but just to lay it out there, she was like...
What Rose McGowan alleges, even though...
Believe women.
I believe her. That I believe it was the 1997 like Sundance, a film festival.
Yeah.
Maybe it was Cannes, maybe it was Sundance. I don't know.
They all blend.
That he sexually assaulted her at that film festival. I believe in 97.
And as we all know now, after a bunch more has come out about Harvey Weinstein, this was a recurring event that he did. You know, he assaulted a lot of women.
Yeah.
You know, Rose McGowan though was one of the first ones to sort of
actually like say something about it.
Yeah. And so she got really blacklisted by Harvey Weinstein. Yep. And Robert Rodriguez knew that when he was like, I want to put her in this film. And he was already sort of contracted to do like his next 3 movies or something with the Weinstein Corporation or whatever it's called, productions, whatever.
Right. So Robert Rodriguez already knew all that stuff, right? Because McGowan had actually disclosed that to him before and wanted to cast her in this film, knowing that it would piss off Harvey, but like also knowing that Bob Weinstein, his brother, would kind of like
smooth it over
a little bit, right? Although Rodriguez later said, and I think Rose McGowan agrees that this is what happened, is that Harvey deliberately slashed the advertisement budget for the film, probably in an effort to hurt its box office. And honestly, this film doesn't do very well in the box office. Certainly not internationally, again, because grindhouse is such like an American tradition, you know. So maybe, I'm sure that that is some aspect of it. I don't know if it's the entire thing,
right?
You know?
That there could be multiple things at play here.
Yeah. So what I have is a quote from McGowan's book.
Yes,
she wrote a book called Brave that came out in 2018, where she talks about what she writes as the ultimate act of cruelty occurred when Rodriguez and Tarantino later sold their films to Dimension Films, because they were made independently with their own production companies, and then sold the films to Dimension Films, which was Weinstein owned. I got this from like a IndieWire or something, whatever, but it's a quote from the book, right? It says, one of the memoir's most gripping chapters, she, being Rose McGowan, recounts her affair with the director Robert Rodriguez, a smooth-talking, sensitive-seeming guy who turned out to be a Svengali. Fun word. He and Quentin Tarantino were planning a double feature, Planetary and Death Proof, based on the pulp movies of the 1970s, and wanted Rose McGowan to star. Rose McGowan fell hard and fast, trusting Rodriguez enough to tell her about her experience with Weinstein. He proceeded to use the knowledge against her, she claims, as a tool for mind games, starting with the scene in which Tarantino, playing a character in this movie, attacks McGowan's character. And she, like, she has a quote of saying, like, I was in a backward world, she writes. I was losing my grip on sanity, in what McGowan interpreted as, like, a pretty ultimate act of cruelty. To like have to have Rodriguez like put that in the film and have her do that, and then later selling the film to her abuser. Yeah, you know.
In response to this, Rodriguez came out, and I think I also read this in an IndieWire article.
Sure, yeah.
To just sort of have Rodriguez's perspective, he was like, I was already contracted before this movie even was made.
Yes,
to sell my next 3 to the Weinsteins.
Yeah,
like that was already decided before Rose was ever involved. And also that the script was already written before Rose was ever involved. Yes. So that scene wasn't specifically about her, right?
Right.
That's Rodriguez's side of it. But either way, the thing that I find interesting, I guess, is that he talks about that scene being specifically the moment that Cherry Darling comes into her power.
Yeah.
That her moment of taking down this guy that wants to sexually assault her is her ultimate moment of becoming a powerful player in this movie. And that's sort of what I mean about this line between empowerment and exploitation, where it's so clear that these two people had such a different read on the scene that they were both involved in as like a writer and as an actor. Because for him, he was like, what's more powerful than this? He's taking, she's taking down this guy that was trying to hurt her.
Yeah.
Whereas for McGowan, it was like the super uncomfortable, in this backwards world thing of like bringing up this previous trauma where she's feeling really betrayed, that like it was not an empowering moment at all. And for me as a viewer, I would not say that that was the most empowering moment in the film for her.
No. I will say that I do really thoroughly enjoy her, like, what does she stick her like peg leg through him?
Yeah.
I liked that.
Yeah.
And like giving him the splinter, just like taking out his eye,
Yeah.
And then also like as far as like it's still obviously like really dangerous and like meant to be perceived as dangerous, but like Quentin Tarantino's character is like kind of not good. Like he's obviously not thinking things through, because like if his intent is to sexually assault someone with his penis, but like it's falling off, or like, and I was like, what are you doing, man?
He said
like
he's
you
just
really
gonna do
haven't
it
thought
quick.
this through, but like it's happening so much faster than I was like, what are you doing? Like you're a fucking idiot.
Well, that's the other thing, is that there's parts of that scene, there's parts of lots of this movie that are played as comedy.
Yeah.
That's sort of played as laughs. And it's like, nothing about that scene of sexual assault felt funny to watch. Even that part where it's like, oh, what are you doing, dude? Like, oh, isn't it funny that he's like so incompetent, and it's like he's, leading himself to his own death. He's like letting himself get infected to do this. And it's like, so stupid, isn't it funny? And it's like,
not really.
Or is it just really,
It's pretty cool watching her like stick her leg in his eye.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty cool.
But I mean, that would have been
It's
cool.
not funny though.
Without it being a sexual assault scene. I mean, they still had, all of them were kidnapped. All of them were captured by the soldiers.
That's true.
The guys had to have their scene where they like attacked their guards and like got out of there and like shot them and stuff. They got to do some cool gun work.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah.
El Rey and Abby and them. And I think that's where JT gets shot, because they're like getting out of there.
Yeah.
And like, that's not what the ladies get to go through. What the ladies get to go through is almost being sexually assaulted.
Yeah.
And then having to defend themselves with like inferior weapons.
Right.
And like not really as cool, badass shots, but instead these sort of like really visceral things.
I think Cherry gets those again, like when she gets a gun for a leg.
Yeah.
Right? Like, especially in the very last scene where she, like, upgrades to, like, a Gatling gun.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty badass.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
There are definitely bigger moments of power for her. But that is also the scene right before she gets her first gun leg.
Right.
Right? So that's supposed to be, like, her leveling up.
Right, which she gets from Ray.
Yeah.
Right? Because, obviously, like, Ray and Cherry's relationship does have, like, a lot of abuse dynamics. But I would say that, like, to the best of his ability, I would say that Ray probably does really care for Cherry.
Yeah.
Is just, like, doesn't know how to not control her.
Yeah. Should we talk more about just abuse in this movie? We
Yeah.
already have a little bit, specifically with, like, Dakota and her husband, Dr. Bill
The
Block.
doctor's block, yeah.
Yeah, the doctor's block.
Yeah.
But yeah. Because, like I said before, I don't think the men know how to do anything that isn't controlling in some way or being controlled.
Or
in some
how
way.
to treat another human being as, like, as an equal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, the big one for me, because the one that's interesting to me is that so often El Rey is this sort of like controlling cool guy of the film. He's kind of our main guy.
Mm-hmm.
He gets all these really cool like gun scenes where he's like twirling them around. There's like a really dumb extended scene like that's supposed to be funny where he's like twirl, 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 twirl for like no reason that goes on too long. It's
And all the
really
guys
good.
are like, wow,
Wow,
he's so cool. Like,
okay. okay.
Yeah.
But like the really interesting relationship to me is him with the sheriff.
Yeah, what even
Like
is it?
Like the sheriff seems to be like getting off on like the fact that he's like, I've really put my neck out for you. I've really protected you. You've done a lot of bad things in the past. You shouldn't have any guns. Now you're showing up with a gun and a girl missing a leg. I could really take you in for this. And like just holding this power over El Rey is like just so appealing to the sheriff.
Yeah. Oh, and then not to mention the sheriff is also the brother of JT, right? And like also his landlord somehow.
Yeah.
And like is consistently like trying to raise his rent as like a way to like
get him to give his barbecue recipe.
Yeah, it's like coercion, kind of.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, he's like, I have power over you.
Yeah.
That's how he does relationships.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing, I think, like with his brother, with JT, JT fights him back and is like,
I'm never going to give you my recipe.
Not if I'm dying in your arms will I give it to you. And then, of course.
And then guess what?
That's a foreshadowing to when they're dying in each other's arms.
It's so funny because they're dying in each other's arms and JT is giving his brother the recipe and his brother is writing it down. I'm like, why are you writing this down? You're about to die.
Yeah.
And then JT is like, you got to take that to your grave, right? And he's like, I can pretty much guarantee it. And I was like, yeah, why did you even bother writing it down? You're silly.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then you have that. But then for some reason with El Rey, what I find extra interesting about their relationship, so they have some sort of past where El Rey's gotten into trouble with the law.
Yeah.
And isn't supposed to have guns for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And like, El Rey just goes along with this. Like, he's so ready to play this sort of more like, yeah, the sheriff is in charge. Every time the sheriff is like, hand over that gun, El Rey's like, here's the gun.
Yeah.
And it's like so polite about it.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, you're the one who's on top. Here's my gun.
Uh-huh.
Until the moment when we have the missing reel where El Rey tells the sheriff his real backstory. Where he's like some sort of black ops, super cool military guy or whatever.
Yeah.
He's that El Rey.
Yeah.
Then it's like the sheriff is like, here's all of the guns.
The guns.
Take every gun.
Yes.
And it's like this complete power flip, this total reversal where even El Rey says, like, the sheriff wants to apologize for treating him bad in the past.
Yeah.
And El Rey says, like, don't mention it, and that's an order. He says, and that's an order, and then suddenly the sheriff is really happy to do whatever El Rey says. He's like, what's our plan, El Rey? Which car are we taking? What are we doing next?
Yeah.
You know?
Oh,
it's like, they're so happy to be in any power relationship as long as they know who's on top.
Yeah, as long as it's very clear. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, God.
And I think that happens throughout.
Yeah.
Where it's like there's this lot of anxiety for all of these men of like not knowing who's in control.
Right.
And needing to be the one who is in control.
And then meanwhile, what do Dakota Block and Cherry say to each other when they're in their cell?
Yeah, no, it's specifically Cherry darling. She's feeling down. It's a low point for her.
For sure.
And Dakota talks about how her girlfriend would say when she was in this situation, whenever everything's really bad and you feel like you're spiraling down, all you have to do is reach up. And Cherry's like, what if there's nothing there to grab you?
Yeah.
And Dakota's like, you still just reach up. And like, this thing that's passed from like girlfriend to like this new woman friend. Yeah. That's like this message of like helping each other. Yeah. Helping to all so that everybody can together reach this position of like safety and like you just equilibrium.
Yeah, you need to reach up and trust that someone who loves and cares about you
is going to help you.
Will help you. Yeah.
Yeah. And that it's so different than what the men understand. Yeah. And that it's like Cherry almost dies because she doesn't want to leave El Rey and wants to stay behind with El Rey. Yes. And then it's Dakota who yells at her, reach up.
Reach up. Yeah.
Puts the rope down for her.
And she actually does like reach up and
and it's like this powerful moment of her grabbing onto that rope and going away.
With just what must be fantastic upper body and core strength.
I know. She is just dangling by a rope from a helicopter.
For a while.
No, Cherry. Well, you know, one of her useless skills is all of the freaking pole work, pole dancing work.
Yeah,
you gotta have hella core for that.
There's nothing useless.
Hella grip. Like you have to have all sorts of skills.
There's nothing useless about good core strength. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
You know. Oh yeah, like she even calls like her ability to ride a motorcycle a useless talent, and I'm like, no, that's very useful, especially right now. You know, you gotta...
I mean, and that is kind of the joke where a lot of her useless talents end up actually being really helpful. Yeah. And I feel like the only reason why she considered them useless was because they weren't helpful in terms of like reaching the top of some sort of like power dynamic, you know? Mm-hmm. But when it came a situation of like getting everybody to safety where she was like, okay, I need to get in there and like kill all these zombies and make sure to clear a way for this helicopter. Yeah. Then it's like, oh, these are all very useful skills. Yes. And she's the one who ends up being really useful when they escape to Mexico. Yes. She's the one who seems to be protecting everybody with all of her
She's
quote-unquote
like one of
useless
the
skills.
only people on a horse. A lot of other people are just walking.
Yeah. That is like, it's this very different dynamic that these women have with each other.
Right. Yeah, I was really hoping in my headcanon, Cherry and Dakota are lovers. after they escape to Mexico.
I have no doubt.
We don't see them together, though. Like, we see them separate of each other.
Yeah.
But
they definitely made it to Mexico together.
Yeah. And they do have, like, at least one little flirty moment where, like, they're introduced to each other for the first time, and Cherry's like, I'm Cherry.
And Dakota's
like, you sure are. And it's like, keep it in your pants, Dakota. Damn, your girlfriend just died.
Yeah, I support you, Dakota.
And your shitty husband just turned into a zombie. Like, let's take it slow.
It's Rose McGowan, though.
That's true. With absolutely impeccable hair and makeup the entire time. Yes.
I bet Dakota would support her in her comedy career.
Absolutely. Or could help her figure out how to become a doctor.
That, too.
Yeah. Learn some medical stuff.
That is actually another great sort of, it's a very limited recurring thing. It only recurs once.
Yeah.
Line, because there's a bunch of things that recur, a bunch of lines that come back.
Yeah.
One where they ask Dakota if she's a doctor, and she's like, I was earlier tonight.
Yes.
And then later somebody asks Cherry if she's like a go-go dancer. Yeah, are you a dancer? And she's like, I was earlier tonight. Yeah. This idea of them leaving behind their past.
Yeah.
Together. To start a future together.
Yes.
I do believe when we were watching it together in that moment when she was leaving El Rey behind because he was dying, I was like, yes, say goodbye to your heterosexuality, girl.
Yes.
Reach up to your lesbian future.
Yes. But of course, it's I know why this happened, but I don't like that this happened, where the sex scene results in a pregnancy.
Because he never misses.
He never misses. Like, first of all, gagging sounds, right?
Yeah, that's another one of those recurring lines where he's like, I know I should hit those zombies because I never miss.
Yeah.
I never miss with my gun.
And as I mentioned to you earlier, like, off mic, it's just like, I hate that, like, he has, like, knowledge of her body she doesn't have.
Yeah,
I don't like that.
You don't fucking know.
Yeah.
But no, he never misses.
He does. But, and I was like,
right.
At least it's a daughter. At least it's a girl.
Yeah, that feels significant.
And then
it's like the new future is for women.
Yeah, and like she does get to keep the like two against the world thing. I was like, but what about you and Dr. Dakota Block? What if you were the two against the world?
I mean, what if it was like your whole group against the world? Maybe it doesn't need to be just two people. Yeah. Maybe you should rethink how you imagine like familial structures.
I mean, everything else is going to shit. You know, might as well.
It's a new future, girl.
Have some deep thoughts on that.
Yeah. Since we just talked about Mexico, should we start talking about like what borders do in this film?
Let's talk about borders because we've mentioned that where they go in Mexico is Tulum, which is a really beautiful city that I've had the pleasure of being in. And honestly, like, I can think of way worse places to wait out a zombie apocalypse. Yeah. Tell me about borders.
Well, I think, so, as I think you mentioned, and same for me, not super familiar with Robert Rodriguez's work.
Spy Kids and From Dusk Till Dawn.
It's my understanding, it's my understanding, though, just from what I've read, that, like, as a Mexican-American, a lot of his films feature, like, borders, like, being near the border with Mexico, that's, like, a common theme that comes up in his work, which... Yeah, fair. Makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
And like this film, it's definitely a case where this is right here between Texas and Mexico. And that the big idea is that, well, this town is gone to shit. This chemical toxin, whatever it is going to keep spreading. So you got to get to Mexico, get your back against the water. Then you'll be safe. Like that's the plan. Right. Starting about halfway through the movie is just to get to Mexico, get your back against the water, be safe.
Even though there's water in Texas, but whatever. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that was a thought that I had. I was like, is Mexico really safer? I understand getting your back against the water, but it sounds like this idea of like getting over the border will be safer. But it's like there wasn't actually a physical border. Like that was a political border. Yeah. But it wasn't a physical border. Yeah. I was like, I wasn't sure. I actually had to look up the history of like, you know, the wall that we have, the border wall. Yeah. And I was like, because like, well, there's sort of a physical barrier there, but it's not like impermeable. People are getting through it all the time.
Right. And what function does the Rio Grande serve? Like, it's not a total border, but like, doesn't that river also serve as like a little bit of like a physical border? Yeah.
And also because this is taking place in a different time, I like wasn't super sure about it. And apparently, like, our current sort of wall situation really began in, like, the 90s. Yeah. That's when we really picked up starting to, like, build a wall to separate us from Mexico because of immigration, scary immigrants. Yeah. But, like, I do think it's kind of interesting that the Secure Fence Act
Okay.
which authorized the construction of 700 miles of wall along the border, which was like the biggest project,
Okay.
which was signed by Bush
Okay.
in 2007.
Oh!
And then this movie came out about 6 months later.
Yes, it did.
So this would have been before we had like a major wall project going on. There would have been some fences there, sort of inconsistent fencing going on. So I'm just sort of like, yeah, getting across the border will be a little bit safer, but like there isn't actually a physical border there.
Yeah.
You know? And then that they end up specifically in Tulum.
Tulum, yeah.
Is that how you pronounce that?
That's how I say it, yeah. Tulum,
okay.
Yeah.
Which, according to World History Encyclopedia,
Mm-hmm.
like the word comes from the idea of like wall.
Oh.
Or like fence or something like that.
Yeah.
Because it has those three.
I think I knew that. Yes.
Those three fortified. We see it at the end of the film. We see those three, that old ruin where it has these three fortified walls, and then its back is to the Caribbean Sea.
Yeah.
I think.
I've been there. It's fucking gorgeous. Yeah.
Yeah. And do the walls look hard to get by?
I mean, honestly, what looks hard to get by is the coastline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was why they were talking about it.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no zombies are going to come by the coast.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. No, and I was kind of looking at it, and it's it was one of the last cities built and inhabited by Maya people.
Yeah.
It was abandoned a few decades after Spain began to occupy the region.
Yeah.
Makes sense. And then both its coastal and its land routes converged sort of at Tulum, making it like this important trading city. They had people coming up the coast and along the roads, sort of all coming to this area as like becoming an important trading city. So just like in general, this feels like a very significant place in terms of like the intersections of borders.
Yeah.
Where it's like right there between land and coast.
Yeah.
It's like right there between these two different time periods. It's right there between like these different types of peoples that are kind of fighting over this area.
Yeah.
And it's also literally bordered in, you know?
Yeah.
So because of that, and just sort of like the idea of like that actual physical border and how getting to Mexico was so important, I also started thinking about it like metaphorically because I can't stop myself and because this is where we have deep thoughts.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking about like what are the other things that we like to think have really permanent, stable borders, but that in this film get really questioned. And I think the really big one is like, what's the line between alive and dead?
Yeah, of course. Zombies. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, in general, zombies bring up that question because what is it to be undead?
Yeah.
And I think this one does it even more because these zombies retain a certain amount of like personhood.
Right.
Or at least for a while, we have like Dr. Block.
Yeah, he's still like
He's still talking. He's
yeah.
still specifically going after his wife.
Yeah, his personality as an individual is still very much there. Yeah, that's
Lieutenant Muldoon can keep talking for a while after he takes off his mask and starts changing, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, where is this actual line that happens where it's like you become infected and you become this kind of mindless zombie who just wants to start like eating and killing? Because some of them seem more like that, and some of the other ones seem to still have at least some degree of thought. Like some of them run away when they see the helicopter come in to slice them up.
That's right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So it's like, how much are these people...
They can recognize like a threat to their well-being.
So it's like, how much are these people still alive?
Right.
Are they all still alive and just need to be cured? Are they dead already?
Yeah.
And the infection has taken them over? Like, we don't really know.
I'm going to be honest. This is making me think of Evil Dead. I know we're not talking about Evil Dead right now, but since we did just go see it, right?
Yeah.
Like, to me, the demons are rather the Deadites, right? In Evil Dead, like... the point of the demon is to torture the living, both physically and like mentally, you know? And so like when the people in Evil Dead like kind of like come through as they're being possessed, like what Ellie says in Evil Dead Rise is like, don't let him take my babies or whatever, you know, is like probably her like last minute, but then like a lot of the Deadites like will kind of fuck with the other people, you know,
they'll like pretend to be.
Yeah, like mommy's with the maggots now, you know, and I'm just like, well, we don't actually know that. Like that demon could just be fucking with you.
Yeah,
you know,
that it's, I think that's a common thing both with demons and with zombies, which we talked about have some crossover. That you're sort of always stuck in that place of like, is this still the person that I once loved?
Right.
Or are they completely gone?
Can I get them back? Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that definitely, they don't really spend any time thinking about it in this movie.
No.
But I think it's there even more so than in like some other zombies where it's like they are immediately so mindless.
Yeah.
Or just want to kill and eat, you know? Like in this
want
one.
brains. Yeah.
Yeah. In this one, they're like, no, they're still talking. They're still making references to like things that happened that morning. Like the Block's kid is playing with his toys and he has like a little toy that like wants to eat the brain and gain your knowledge.
Yeah.
And then later Dr. Bill Block tells his wife that he wants to eat her brain and gain her knowledge. So it's like, is that him?
Or is it like an echo?
Yeah.
You know?
And we just, like, don't know, and the movie just doesn't answer that.
No, it really doesn't.
Which I find interesting.
Yeah, but again, like, I think there's so much that the movie doesn't answer, right? Like, you don't get to figure out what El Rey's past is all about, you know?
Right, which is another border that I actually think is really interesting that really shows up with El Rey, is sort of that line between soldier and criminal. Because they're both, like, killers.
Yeah.
El Rey never changes from being this, like, gun-wielding, super good with a knife killer.
Yeah. And soldiers can do some shady shit.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And, like, the whole first half of the film, the sheriff isn't trusting El Rey. You know, he has this criminal past, but then it's like, oh, no, he actually has this, like, soldier past. So it's the same person doing the same things, but now it's, like, super respectable and good.
Right, yeah.
But it's, like, the same.
Maybe because, like, it's happening under, like, the protection of, like, an established government.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's happening with, like a greater goal in mind, rather than...
that, like, capacity he has for killing suddenly is now making him a hero.
Right.
Instead of a criminal.
Yes.
And then he gets, like, a soldier's death, you know? And it's like what you said with, what you were talking about earlier, actually, was a good example of this, too, where Lieutenant Muldoon is, when he gets killed.
Yes.
He's like, I was just doing it for my men.
Yes, yeah.
I was just being a soldier.
Yeah.
And yeah, Ray is like, God bless you and thank you for your service to your country.
Yeah.
It's like, you still get to be this honorable soldier, even though you just were responsible for the death of this entire town.
Yeah.
You wiped out this entire town.
And honestly, like, at least what I get from the ending, the last scene is like, they don't get it under control.
Yeah, and it's like sweeping at least the nation.
In Mexico. Yeah,
yeah, it's like, getting down the continent.
Yeah. So it's like, you may have, like, either purposefully or accidentally caused a zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, but like, God bless you. And
yeah, and thank you for your service.
Like,
I don't know.
So that's like another interesting sort of like, these are two opposite things, but are they actually opposites? No, but the way we're going to treat them is completely opposite.
Two sides of the same coin. It's like, yeah, it's the same idea, right? But like two different perspectives of the same idea. And like, how different is that really, you know? I venture, not really, not very, you know?
Another dichotomy that we get that we've really already touched on, so I'm not going to talk about it more, but I just want to like drive home that this is one, is that like we have that masculine versus feminine
obviously
going on, and this idea that this is like a line that we don't cross. This is the masculine and this is the feminine, you know?
Yes.
Like, this is a very masculine film, but it's like a very toxic masculinity that I don't think we're necessarily, it's like cool in some spots, but we're not necessarily, I don't think, supposed to like wholly root for it, because in the end it really is like the women who start out in this position of being like the victims and always like having no option but to keep running away, you know? They're the ones who end up like saving the day and having the new society, you know? And it's really,
and being able to have the kids that will be the next generation in their new society.
Yeah, and those are a girl child, you know? Yeah. So I feel like it has a lot to say about like the kind of gender binary of like having these like, the men are like hyper masculine and super cool and the women are like sexy victims, but it's like, that's not really what ends up playing out in the film. So it like is like kind of questioning it.
Yeah.
And how like the men don't really know how to interact with women other than to see them as like people who need to be protected.
Yeah.
Or people who need to be subdued.
Or controlled. Yeah.
Because like even El Rey is apparently very controlling and possessive over Cherry. Yeah. According to her. You know? And that's like the good, healthy relationship that we have.
Well,
right? Yeah. And that like the attempted rape scene happens because Cherry sort of talks back to the soldier initially.
Yeah.
And he needs to like put her in her place, you know?
Well, what does he say? He says like, do you want to say fuck you to me? And she's like, not at this moment.
Yeah.
And it's like, I love that she's like reserving the right, like putting that in her pocket. Yeah. Like, I might want to say fuck you to you, but not right now. But I'm just going to keep that. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's also the line of like, she's very funny in this film. She's just a very funny person. Yeah. And because she does stab him with her like little wooden leg, she has the line that's like, you wanted to give me wood, but I'm the one giving you wood. Yeah. That it's like this thing of like the men constantly being threatened by the women getting these like positions of power. But then it's like, it isn't actually Cherry taking the role of being like the one in power and like being powerful over men. That's like a really big deal. What I feel like was a really big empowering moment for her is actually when she has her first conversation with Dakota, where they talk about reach up. Things seem bad right now. Yeah. Reach out to each other. Yeah. Become allies. It's like when she becomes like an ally with Dakota and then with El Rey, actually. Yeah. That they all work together to solve it. And that it's like not really a power dynamic.
Right. They're all working towards a common goal.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really where the actual solution lies.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's some interesting gender stuff that I felt like we had to talk about, which we already have, but I just wanted to emphasize it right here near the end of our episode.
Yeah.
And the last one, which you brought up.
Yeah.
Bisexuality.
Yes. Yeah. Psycho-bisexuals. Yeah.
Yeah. Because, I mean, Dakota is probably bisexual. She never says explicitly. Yeah. We don't know, but she's married to a man and she's had at least one girlfriend. So, like, we can assume she's something like that.
Yeah.
I'm bringing it up here with borders because does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Which is it? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, are you gay or straight?
Yeah,
you know?
And where's the line?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that Dakota, I don't know that this film is doing it on purpose, but like statistically, bisexual people across the gender spectrum are statistically more likely to be victims of domestic abuse than gay or straight people.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And like there's a lot of ideas about this. I was reading an article on Mashable about like different studies on bisexual people and their relationship to like violence, domestic abuse and stuff. And that like a lot of it probably comes from a lot of biphobic beliefs we have in our society about, this is going to sound familiar if you've seen the movie, bisexual people are like hypersexual, they're untrustworthy, they're more likely to cheat.
Or not actually bisexual.
Yeah, or they're just like confused. They're lying about it. They're untrustworthy. They're confused. Yeah, they don't really know what they want.
Yeah.
So, like, abusive partners can use all of that biphobic bullshit as an excuse to, like, control and surveil their partner. Dr. Bill Block feels like he's entitled to see what his wife has on her phone because she's a bisexual who might be, like, cheating on him with a woman. You know? And it so happens that he's right in this case, but, like, he was already an abusive piece of shit. You know? But he's, like, using that as an excuse.
And Fergie seemed very nice.
Yeah, just because you think that your partner might be cheating on you doesn't give you a right to, like, search through your partner's phone.
Right.
I like to try to control them or like see everything that they're doing, you know? But it becomes this excuse that he uses.
Right. Or that like because their partner is bisexual, that opens it up for them to be even more possibly even more unfaithful.
Yeah.
Because there's a larger pool.
Yeah. It's this constant,
a perceived larger pool.
Yeah. It's this constant, like, biphobic idea that it's like, oh, bisexuals just will sleep with anybody.
Yeah.
Which is like, no, that's not true at all.
But then also, I mean, there's also that, and also just the you know, really shitty representation in media of bisexuals is either just like not existing at all or being like psycho, promiscuous, you know, incapable of relationships.
Or like, if it's a character where we are supposed to like them and root for them, they'll explicitly be like, well, I don't really care for labels, or they like won't say what they are. In this case, we don't ever know exactly how Dakota events.
Which in real life, I'm like, I get it.
In real life, that's cool. In media, where we only have like this really kind of like psycho,
we have an hour and 40 minutes.
It's like maybe you can just let her say that she's bisexual and it's fine.
But then that also makes me think of like, especially talking about gender roles, that like and the gender roles in this film of like men feeling the need to like control and dominate other people in their lives regardless of those people's genders, right? Like thinking about how I feel like also in media bisexual women and like their relationships or interest in other women are downplayed as like not a threat to a heterosexual relationship. I'm thinking about Katy Perry's I Kissed a Girl. Yeah. Right? Like, oh, my boyfriend doesn't mind. Yeah. You know, I'm just like, you kissed somebody.
Yeah, but the idea is that it was there to be like titillating. Yeah. I'm thinking actually specifically in this film. Yeah. When we're at the Go-Go Club.
Oh, yeah.
One of the first things we see is two of the go-go dancers making out with each other, and their boss, their manager, Skip, Mark, Scott, whatever his name is.
Spike, Fido,
you know, whatever his name is. He doesn't matter. But he tells these two women who are like making out, maybe in a relationship, whatever, we don't know. He tells them to save it for the stage. Yeah. So yeah, it's like this idea that women's sexuality is only in service of men. Yeah. So we explicitly have in this film like bisexuality or women's sexuality with other women as this thing that's like treated as like a manipulation or a performance that's only meant to turn men on, or it's like is a threat to manhood. Yeah. And it's suggesting that men aren't necessary.
Or a threat to traditional values.
Yeah. And at the end of this movie, the men kind of aren't necessary. The women are running shit.
That's true.
So it's like, I don't know. It's interesting. It's kind of cool.
It is cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Do we want to
like that ending? Yeah.
since we talked about the ending, do we want to know? Play a game.
I do. I really, really do.
Okay, so what I did was I made a Mad Lib for a sort of grindhouse exploitation B-movie type
Fun!
thing.
I like that.
I mostly based it on the trailer for Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, which was kind of a parody of exploitation films.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured it would be a good trailer to sort of come up with like a lot of the basic things that come up. I changed a little bit of it, and then I took out all of the like big main descriptor words,
Sure.
and now we're gonna fill them in ourselves.
Oh
by
my
me
gosh.
asking you things.
I can't remember the last time I did a Mad Lib.
I know.
It's been a
it'll
hot
be
minute.
fun.
All
I
right,
don't
let's
know.
do it.
Maybe it'll be done and we'll never do it again, but we're doing it now.
Let's do it. Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing I need is, some of my things are kind of vague and weird, but I need like a scary descriptor. Like a little word in front of other words that
Yeah.
each time you hear it, you're like, that's something scary.
How about ferocious?
Ferocious. And then I just need like a plural noun.
Lesbians.
Oh, yeah.
Ferocious lesbians.
Okay. I need a time of year.
Oh, fall equinox.
Okay.
Getting fancy with it.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
It's best. Okay. I need a location.
Oh, Tulum, Mexico.
Tulum. Okay. Give me another adjective. Another descriptor
A
word.
descriptor word. Purple.
Okay. I just need a name for like a person.
Oh, Spike.
Spike. Back to Spike. Okay. Give me a blue collar job.
Oh, plumber.
Okay. Cool. Plumber. Give me an object that could be used as a weapon.
Oh, but not necessarily.
Yeah, that isn't already a weapon, but could be one.
Like a hammer.
Yeah. A hammer. Give me a hobbyist, a type of hobbyist.
A hobbyist?
Yeah, just like a hobby.
Like an apiarist? Like someone who keeps bees?
Yeah,
Okay.
beekeeper. That's so funny because when I was like thinking of this for myself, my thought was beekeeper.
I just like the word.
Same brain.
I just like the word apiarist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, give me another adjective. I have a lot of adjectives.
Oh boy. Okay. Person, place, or thing.
No,
a describing
descriptive
word.
word, yeah.
I know what nouns and adjectives are. A describing word. Hairy.
Hairy. Yeah. Okay. A past tense verb.
Jumped.
Give me a profession. Any type of job.
Biochemical engineer.
Ooh, I have to write all of that now.
Sorry.
The little spot is not big enough.
Well,
Eng.
biochem.
Eng.
Yeah.
Okay, give me just like a type of person. Whatever that means to you.
How about like type A?
Ooh. How about a type of criminal?
Ooh. Arsonist.
Ooh, saucy.
Yeah.
Okay. I just need like a community.
Like an intramural softball team.
Ooh. Why do you keep giving me big things though?
I'm sorry.
Soft ball team, right? Really tiny. Okay, give me a verb with an ing ending. Whatever you call those type of verbs.
Aren't those called gerunds?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm the English major. I don't know.
I'm the one trying to learn Spanish, so like shooting.
Okay, last one. I just need a holiday.
Oh, Arbor Day.
Arbor Day. Okay, are you
Okay.
ready for this?
I'm so ready.
So our movie is Attack of the Ferocious Lesbians. This fall equinox, death and destruction come to Tulum. Vicious, purple lesbians are haunting the streets, and no one is safe.
Purple lesbians.
I don't know what that means.
I don't know.
The only hope for survival is Spike, a plumber with a death wish and a hammer. Aided by a sexy beekeeper, Spike must unravel the hairy mystery of the deadly lesbians before it is too late. Can they save the day before they are jumped by whoever or whatever is controlling the lesbians? Is it the lady biochemical engineer? The greedy type A person? The mysterious arsonist? Or does this go all the way to the top? It will be a race against time as they battle to save the intramural softball team from nature's perfect shooting machine. The ferocious lesbians. You've never seen anything like this.
Wait,
Coming to theaters this Arbor Day.
are the ferocious lesbians?
Yeah.
Are they on the intramural softball team?
I don't know. Is Spike the plumber on the intramural?
Is he on the softball team? Yeah,
I don't know.
Purple lesbians. That was good. That was fun.
Yeah. So if somebody wants to make that trailer,
Right, or make that movie.
you have our permission.
Yep.
Attack of the Ferocious Lesbians.
That was good. That was
Okay.
fun.
Yeah.
I'll make one for Death Proof.
Okay. Yeah. So
figure it
join
out.
us next time when we
Yes.
talk about Death Proof.
This has been
Deep Thoughts, Shallow Plots.
Yeah. Shout out to Sound Guy Matt.
Follow us on
Yeah.
Instagram
Oh, that's right. We have an Instagram.
at Deep Thoughts, Shallow Plots.
Yeah, all lowercase, no spaces, all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
And until next time, remember, there's a difference between being frank and being dick.